We have with us today Al Cardenas. He's a prominent Cuban-American lawyer from Florida, head of the American Conservative Union, and a longtime advisor to Mitt Romney, the Republican nominee. Welcome, Mr. Cardenas.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to be with you.
Mr. Cardenas, one thing that struck me this week, surprised me a little bit, was that the Romney campaign turned to welfare reform. What struck me as a little bit of a distraction, I thought the strategy was to focus on why the economy isn't better and why there are not more jobs and what Governor Romney could do that President Obama hasn't. Why this turn to welfare?
Well, it's a major challenge on two counts. Number one, there's been a troubling pattern over the last few months of this president, by executive fiat, surpassing his constitutional authority and the separation of powers. He did it with immigration. He did it with recess appointments when there's no recess. He's doing it now with welfare reform. And at some point in time, having an imperial president is something that America needs to talk about. The second aspect of it is, since 1996, it's been the most significant reform of our entitlement programs and systems that we've ever had in place. Once it was instituted, half of the welfare rolls disappeared. People became proud homeowners, they became proud returnees to work, and the president's trying to do away with that by providing states with a fiat that people, instead of getting training, instead of going back to high school, instead of getting their equivalency education, can merely babysit or do other things that are not conducive to gaining work.
In 1996, President Clinton and a bipartisan Congress helped end welfare as we know it by requiring work for welfare. But on July 12th, President Obama quietly announced a plan to gut welfare reform.
Well, the ads that Mr. Romney ran said that under the Obama plan, you wouldn't have to work and you wouldn't have to train for a job. They'd just send you a check. Is that literally true? I mean, Ron Haskins, who was a Republican staffer who worked on welfare reform, says it's not true. The letter from the HHS secretary talks about giving states a chance to have waivers if they can show a better way to get more people to work.
Well, the ad is true in the sense that you can fill out a lot of paperwork and not get proper training, and in essence stop looking for work and continue to get checks, and that would apply to about 40% of the welfare universe. So if you're looking at this as a way, can a bureaucratic process provide an opportunity for folks to stop seeking work and get a check, yeah, I think it's an accurate statement.
I see. Now, as you know, we have a lot of unemployed people in America, 8.3% unemployment. 3.7 million people have been out of work for a full year or more and say that they're still looking for work. What would Governor Romney do as president to help those people that President Obama has been unable to do so far?
Yeah, well, listen, most of us think we're in a recession, but if you're unemployed and one of those 20-some million people that we're talking about, we're in a depression, and they need hope and they need an opportunity. Mitt Romney last week unveiled a 5-step program dealing with trade, dealing with tax reform, dealing with energy reform and other measures that would incentivize capital investment, entrepreneurship in America, create jobs, shift capital from the public sector to the private sector so that you can make the necessary investments to get America back on its feet. I think it's a good plan. It's a first opportunity we've seen of layout of a vision to generate jobs as compared to the president's incentives, which continue to be to grow the government as the answer to our problems.
But none of those things would do much very quickly. Those are long-run plans to how to make the economy grow faster. If Mitt Romney were elected president at the beginning of 2013, he'll take the oath of office. Is there anything he can do to bring down the unemployment rate more quickly than President Obama has been able to do?
Well, they do have a short-term effect. I mean, the layout of the process may take a long while, but the investment, the capital investment, it's a short-term process. I mean, what people need to do, investors need to have, is confidence in their government that they're going to do the right things to stimulate prosperity. And so once they know there's a plan in place and it makes sense, investments will begin to take place immediately. It's the same thing as you have in the commodities business. We don't We don't fix the price of oil based on what the consumers are doing today. We base it on the vision of how much supply and demand there will be a few years from now. Same thing with investors. They'll invest money based on the layout that they see, the vision of the president. They're agreeing that it's in keeping with the rules of capital investment and globalization. And so these measures that he's outlined not only are important for America, but they're also a message to investors, to capital, not only domestic but from abroad, to say, you know, things are going to be fine. Come to America, invest your capital, you get fair returns.
I see. Well, let's talk a little politics. You've been around politics for a long time. To most of us in the press, this looks like a pretty close race. Is that the way it looks to you?
It is. It'll be a very close race till the very end. Now, there's a chance the race may break in the last few weeks, but if it breaks, it'll only break in Romney's favor. If you look at the Romney-Carter campaign, if you look at a couple of others, in the past, whenever you've had tight races involving an incumbent and a challenger, it always breaks in a challenger's way, and that's because historically the undecided vote breaks 2-1 in favor of a challenger. So if you're going into September, if you're going into early October, and it looks like the race is still tight, that augurs pretty well for Romney, because most of the undecideds will vote for the challenger at the end of the day.
I see. Now, one group of voters that seems to be pretty important, particularly in some key states like Arizona, are the Hispanic vote. And I know you're close to this community politically. In our polls, we find that Hispanic voters are basically 3-1 siding with President Obama. Why do you think that is, and what is it that Mitt Romney needs to do to win more of this important growing population?
Well, candidly, the Democrats have done a great job of demonizing Republicans for the last 5 years. Republicans have done a lousy job of reacting to it. And so you have this 3-1 split, which is not sustainable if we're going to continue to be competitive nationwide. And so we're not going to, in the short term, make great strides in places like California, but we need to make great strides in the swing states in America: Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, states that have a significant Hispanic population that we can work with. And we need to get those numbers from 25, 27% to 35, 38% in those states in order to win those states and therefore win the election. I think that's a doable plan. It takes a lot of work, but I'm familiar with the plan, and I'm familiar with the steps that need to be taken, and I'm confident that we'll get there.
And are you comfortable with where the Republicans are on immigration, that the platform will be one that Hispanics feel comfortable with?
Well, look, President Obama has failed the Hispanic community miserably at a number of fronts, immigration just being one of them. But in education, Hispanics are way behind mainstream America, the African American community even. Hispanics are way behind on education, way behind on unemployment, and frankly, they need an answer on immigration. And the president's answer is my way or the highway. In order for you to have immigration reform, you're going to have a bipartisan solution. The only one of the two candidates who has pledged a bipartisan solution to immigration reform is Governor Romney. And when that happens, I think you'll see something done. If it continues to be politicized, if it continues to be a wedge issue for President Obama and the Democrats, they'll never get it done because it's to their advantage not to do so. I hope Americans deserve better. I think immigrants deserve better. And I think Romney's solution of seeking a bipartisan reform package is the only way that we have a chance to pass immigration reform.
I see. Well, it would be certainly unusual to see bipartisan anything in Washington these days. Let me, if I may, Mr. Cardenas, close on the question of housing. You've been around the housing business off and on in your career. You spent a few years in the late 80s on the board of Fannie Mae. What advice are you giving Mr. Romney about what to do about the large number of Americans who have mortgages that are greater than the value of their houses and thus are prone to default and certainly can't refinance?
Well, obviously, most of those solutions need to come from the private sector, not the public sector. There are a couple of larger institutions in America that are coming up with some innovative plans. For example, there's one that tells you, look, if you're underwater, if you're late in your payments, let's make a deal. You assign over a deed to us, which we'll hold in trust. You enter into a lease, the payments for which are significantly less than your mortgage payments. We'll give you a 3-year lease as long as you occupy the dwelling. And then within those 3 years, you can exercise a right to purchase, and we'll give you the property back. And that's the kind of forward thinking that can allow people to keep their homes, keep their credit and move forward in the right direction. These government programs where you have to go into default, where you have to not keep up with your responsibilities in order to receive assistance are not the way to go in America. It doesn't build character. It creates a false market, and at the end of the day prolongs the pain. We need to sell the available inventory at market prices, not at government set prices. We need to get the private sector to fix the problem, and then we need to move forward. We still have 2 or 3 years of pain to go through, but it'll be far less if we let the private sector do it and government and the courts stop interfering with the whole process of liquidating these assets and creating a fair marketplace.
So the best thing the government can do, in your view, is to step back and let the private market take over here.
Absolutely.
I see. Well, we're out of time. Mr. Cardenas, thank you very much. I hope you have a good time in Tampa when the convention gets there soon.
Hey, thanks for having me. We hope to see you there.